We've had lots of new building sets over the years in Conan, pulling on both real world and fantasy architecture. We all love a new building set, but I've got a few that I'd really want to see in the future, so I thought I'd put them in this list. Of course, this is just my opinion. I would love to hear what you guys want to see, so if you don't agree with my suggestions, do drop your own in the comments. So without further ado, let's get started. Firstly, one I've been quite vocal about before, and that is Lemurian. This group have played a huge part in the lore of Conan Exiles, but aside from some parts of the East, they're really not all that well represented. The architectural style of Lemurian is very clearly inspired by the architecture of the Khmer, an ethnic group native to Cambodia. You'll most likely recognise it from Angkor Wat, a temple complex in Cambodia built by the Khmers, originally as a Hindu temple to Vishnu, but eventually turning it into a Buddhist temple instead. Lemurian is really interesting to me because of how visually deep and complex it is. There are a few mods out there that offer the ability to build with Lemurian pieces, and from the small amount I've used of them, they're not too bad, but I would like to see it officially introduced into the game. Most of the Lemurian architecture in game is currently quite eroded or damaged, so I think a cleaned up Lemurian building set could be pretty good, and possibly one of the most unique sets in the game. Given how fundamental the Lemurians are to Conan's story, I think this could probably fit into any future age, and open up a whole world of building that is otherwise near impossible to replicate in game. Secondly, another set I've mentioned a couple of times before, that is Acheronian. This is generally all the Giant King related structures you'd see around the map, and there's very little in either the base game or the mods I've tried that can actually replicate this style. Aside from Conan Exiles and some examples in the Age of Conan, I actually couldn't find any other real examples of Acheronian architecture, nor could I manage to discover a real life counterpart it may have been based on. The Acheronians were an ancient civilization of sorcerers, home to figures like Zaltana the Witch Queen and Zaltoten, the High Priest of Python, the latter of which is a pretty big antagonist in the Conan source material. If we ever do get an Acheronian building set in-game, I would imagine it would have to come in with something sorcery related, maybe in the age when we eventually pick up Mekmosis' story again. The Acheronians are as mysterious as they are interesting, and the remnants of their architecture around the exiled lands are always imposing and impressive structures. With the right approach, I think a set like this would be a great option to have in-game. The third is one that I don't really have and couldn't find a proper name for, so I've just called it Siptah Red. We're namely looking at the ancient structures on Siptah built from stone and gold. I will admit I'm probably not as up to brush on my Siptah lore as I would like to be, so I'm not entirely sure where this architecture comes from culturally, nor what real life style it may be emulating, but I think this set would be great to have in the base game. I kind of see it as a fusion of reinforced stone, Khitan, and a little bit of Turanian, based mainly on the colorization. A lot of the example structures are heavily damaged, so we don't really have a proper view of how well rounded this set might look if it were restored, but I think it could fit really well into the game. There's a lot of aspects that seem pretty much perfect for implementation, namely the arches and the large pillars. They do stand out as very attractive pieces. That being said, I think the only downside to introducing Siptah Red would be that the structures have a very gentle slope to them. This has been achieved somewhat with Aesir and Pyramid thus far, so it is doable to some degree, but I'd want this set to be flexible and a faithful recreation of these impressive structures. Outside of that though, I think that Siptah Red just has a really nice balance of tone and colour that we really don't find in many other sets. If this could be implemented into the game as its own building pack, I think Siptah Red could be a great option. Finally, a somewhat lofty hope of mine, and that is true Gothic. We already have some Gothic elements in game, especially with the Stormglass and Stormglass Cathedral sets, but I'd love to see a truly Gothic set added into the game. Considering how timeless Gothic architecture is, there are already a few mods that do a decent job of emulating this style. That being said, they are pretty complicated and not very user-friendly from the jump, even though they are very visually impressive. Stormglass and Numidian together already do a fair job at Gothic, but I think you do end up a bit pigeonholed considering the colour and tone of the Stormglass pieces, whereas real-world Gothic is more often brick and stone as opposed to how Stormglass appears. I think there's a lot of things that could be done with the Gothic style. It is definitely one of the more complex schools of architecture, and I think it'd likely be really complex to port into the game, hence why some of the mods are probably a bit difficult to use. Nevertheless, despite that, in my mind nothing really matches true Gothic when it comes to this sort of spectacle, especially for stuff like castles and cathedrals. Nothing beats it. To be perfectly honest, I don't think true Gothic is likely to be added into the game, at least not any point soon, but God knows I would love to see it. And there we have it, 4 of the building sets I am really hoping come to Conan Exiles in the future. Thank you for watching, and of course a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. I think Lemurian is the most likely out of these bunch to actually be implemented, but I think any of them could be given enough time and in the right update cycle. I'm curious to hear your opinions in the comments though, do let me know what you'd want to see. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.